My parents gave my college fund to my brother because he was the golden child, but when they needed money, I let them beg. I still remember the day I found out my college fund was gone. It was a Tuesday afternoon in April of my senior year. Cherry blossoms floated past my bedroom window as I sat cross-legged on my bed, surrounded by acceptance letters from MIT, Stanford, and Carnegie Mellon. 3 dreams materialized on heavy cardstock, each one representing years of sleepless nights, perfect test scores, and the kind of determination that made my chemistry teacher joke that I must have caffeine instead of blood. I'd been accepted to all 3, the impossible trinity of computer science programs. The acceptance rate at MIT that year was 4.1%. At Stanford, 3.9%. I had conquered them all, just like I'd promised myself I would when I was 12 and built my first rudimentary AI program on a secondhand laptop. My desk was littered with post-it notes counting down to decision day. 14 days left to choose which dream to follow. 14 days until I would officially leave behind the shadow I'd lived in for 18 years. But first, I needed to talk about money. Mom?
Dad.
I called out, padding downstairs with my acceptance letters neatly arranged in a folder. Do you have a minute? I need to discuss the college fund. They were in the living room, my father absorbed in his newspaper, while my mother scrolled through her iPad. The evening news played quietly in the background, something about the stock market reaching record highs. My mother looked up first, her reading glasses perched on the tip of her nose. What about it, Emily? I sat down on the ottoman, spine straight, the way I'd practiced for my scholarship interviews. I've been accepted to MIT, Stanford, and Carnegie Mellon for computer science, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral despite the pride swelling in my chest. I need to know exactly how much is in the college fund, so I can factor that into my decision. The silence that followed was odd. My parents exchanged a look, the kind adults share when they're deciding who will deliver bad news. What? I asked, that single syllable already loaded with dread. My father cleared his throat and folded his newspaper precisely along its creases. Emily, he began, using the tone reserved for explaining complicated adult matters to children, there isn't a college fund anymore. The cherry blossoms continued their gentle descent outside our window. A car honked in the distance. The news anchor announced a breakthrough in quantum computing. What do you mean, anymore? I asked, though I already knew. I already knew. My mother sighed and set her iPad down. We gave it to Jake for his startup. Last year.
Jake.
My older brother. The real genius of the family, as my mother had called him throughout our childhood. The one whose mediocre grades were excused because he was too creative for conventional education. The one whose half-finished science fair projects still somehow won first place because he had vision. The one who had dropped out of college after 2 years because Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg didn't need degrees. All of it. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. It was a calculated investment decision, my father explained, his businessman voice taking over. Jake's app idea has tremendous potential. The early investor projections suggest a return of... Was it my fund? I interrupted. The one Grandma started when I was born? The one you both added to every birthday and Christmas? Another exchanged glance. Yes, my mother admitted. But Emily, you have to understand. Jake needed seed money, and startups require significant capital too. Did you give him his fund too? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Jake didn't have as much saved, my father said carefully. He used his for living expenses during his first year of college. Of course. Jake had attended an expensive private university before dropping out, while I'd been planning on scholarships from the beginning, knowing the fund would stretch further that way. He's the real genius in the family, my mother said with a shrug, as if that explained everything. As if that justified everything. I felt something crack inside me. Not break. Breaking would come later, but crack, like the first fault line in a dam that would eventually collapse. When were you going to tell me? I asked, surprised by how steady my voice remained. Another uncomfortable exchange of glances. We assumed you'd get scholarships, my father said. With your grades and test scores. Jake needed the capital now, and you're always so resourceful. Resourceful? That was the word they used when I built my own computer from parts one found at the Electronics Recycling Center. When I taught myself Python and Java from library books because we couldn't afford coding camp like Jake had attended. When I worked part-time at the local grocery store to pay for my AP exam fees while Jake got a new car for his 18th birthday. I see, I said, though I didn't. Not fully. Not yet. The magnitude of their betrayal was still washing over me in waves. It's for the best, Emily, my mother added, her tone softening with what she probably thought was compassion. Jake's app could revolutionize social media. The investors think it could be the next Instagram. I knew Jake's app idea. It was a photo-sharing platform with filters that made people look like animals. Nothing revolutionary. Nothing that hadn't been done before by developers with actual experience. And what about my revolution? I asked quietly. What about my future? My father's brow furrowed. Don't be dramatic, Emily. You'll be fine. Apply for financial aid. Take out loans like most students. Or consider state school. They're much more affordable. Just like that, my dreams were being downsized, repackaged into what was convenient for them after they'd given my future away. That night, alone in my room, I didn't cry. I was beyond tears. Instead, I pulled out my laptop and began researching every scholarship available to me. National Merit, Women in STEM, First Generation Tech Innovator Grants, Local Rotary Club Awards, anything and everything. I created a spreadsheet, color-coded by deadline, amount, and probability of success. I worked until 3 a.m., the blue light of my screen illuminating my determination. The next morning at breakfast, I was quiet. Gone was the daughter who shared her achievements, her dreams, her day-to-day thoughts. In her place was a stranger, a girl with hollow eyes who had learned an invaluable lesson. In this family, she was always going to be the afterthought. My mother noticed my silence first. Are you still upset about yesterday? She asked, buttering her toast. We can talk about some loan options if you want. No need, I replied, not looking up from my cereal. I'll figure it out myself. That's the spirit, my father said approvingly, missing the ice in my voice. You've always been independent. Not independent. Abandoned. There's a difference. A week later, Jake came home for a family dinner, his first visit in months. He bounded through the door in an expensive new jacket, carrying the latest iPhone and talking a mile a minute about his app's progress. The UI is going to blow people's minds, he announced, helping himself to the wine my parents had opened. We've got a meeting with some angel investors next month. They're talking 7 figures, potentially. My parents beamed at him like he was bringing light to a dark room. Their golden child. Their investment. Emily got into MIT, Stanford, and Carnegie Mellon, my mother mentioned during dinner, almost as an afterthought. Jake looked up from his plate, genuine surprise on his face. No way. That's impressive, sis. For a moment, I glimpsed the brother I'd looked up to when we were young, before our parents' favoritism had created a chasm between us. Which one are you choosing? Before I could answer, my father jumped in. She's still figuring out the financial aspects. You know how expensive those schools are. Jake's brow furrowed. But what about her college fund? Wasn't Grandma's inheritance part of that? The table went silent. My mother became very interested in her salad. My father cleared his throat. We actually directed those funds to your startup, son, my father said. It was a family decision to invest in your future. It wasn't a family decision. It was their decision. I hadn't even been consulted. Jake at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. Oh, he said, glancing at me. I didn't realize that. It's fine, I said, the words like ash in my mouth. Your animal filter app is clearly more important than my education. Emily, my mother warned. No, I want to know. I pressed, looking directly at Jake. What exactly did you do with my college fund? Jake squirmed in his seat. Well, we rented office space in the tech district and hired a couple of developers. And there was the launch party last month. A launch party. My future had paid for cocktails and hors d'oeuvres for Jake's tech bros. Sounds like money well spent, I said, pushing away from the table. Excuse me, I have scholarship applications to complete. I spent the next 2 months in a haze of determination. School, part-time job, scholarship applications, repeat. I stopped engaging with my family beyond the bare minimum. When they asked about my day, I gave one-word answers. When they tried to discuss college options, I changed the subject. I was building a wall between us, brick by brick, silence by silence. My bedroom became my sanctuary. I pinned rejection letters on one wall as fuel for my fire. Acceptance letters and scholarship offers went on another, a growing tapestry of my escape route. One night, long after my parents had gone to bed, I heard a soft knock on my door. Jake stood there, looking uncharacteristically serious. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped aside to let him in, curious despite myself. "I didn't know the money was yours," he said without preamble. "I thought they were investing from their savings or something." I studied his face, searching for the lie. "Would it have made a difference if you had known?" He hesitated too long before answering. "I'd like to think so. But you're not sure." I finished for him. He had the grace to look ashamed. "The app is going to be big, Emily. When it takes off, I'll help you with school. I promise." "I don't want your help," I told him, my voice quiet but firm. "Not anymore." 3 weeks later, I received the notification that changed everything. Full scholarship.
Am I good?
Room, board, tuition, everything covered. Against astronomical odds, I'd done it. I'd found my own way when the path that had been promised to me was given to someone else. I printed the scholarship letter and left it on the kitchen table without comment. No celebration. No announcement. Just evidence that I didn't need them after all. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I made a promise to myself. This betrayal would not define me. It would fuel me. I would build something so significant, so revolutionary, that one day they would realize what they had discarded so carelessly. And when that day came, I would not be there to hear their apologies. I got the scholarship. Full ride. Room, board, tuition. Everything. The day I left for MIT was unremarkable in its quietness. No fanfare, no tearful goodbyes. My suitcases stood by the door like sentinels guarding my escape route. I'd called a rideshare service to take me to the airport, despite my father's half-hearted offer to drive me. "I've got it covered," I told him, the same words they'd used when explaining why they couldn't help with my education. My mother hovered in the kitchen doorway, uncertainty clouding her features. "Are you sure you packed everything? Winter in Massachusetts is brutal." "I researched it," I replied, checking my watch. 7 minutes until my driver arrived. 7 minutes until I could breathe again. Jake wasn't there. He was at a tech conference in San Francisco, pitching to more investors. The Animal Filter app was apparently gaining traction, according to my parents' proud updates at dinner, updates I'd stopped acknowledging weeks ago. When my phone buzzed with the driver's arrival, I picked up my bags and headed for the door. "Emily," my mother called after me, her voice catching. "Call us when you land." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Not because I was sad to leave, but because I was afraid the relief might be too evident in my voice. My parents didn't even drive me to the airport. That fact echoed in my mind as the plane took off, Boston-bound. It wasn't that I wanted their company. I'd grown accustomed to their absence in all the ways that mattered. It was the principle, the final confirmation that in their hierarchy of priorities, I barely registered. MIT welcomed me with indifferent arms. A campus of brilliant minds too focused on their own work to care about anyone's backstory. It was perfect. My dorm room was sparse but functional. My roommate, Zoe, was a physics prodigy from Oregon who spent most of her time in the lab. We developed an easy rhythm of mutual respect and minimal interference. She didn't ask questions when I returned to the room at 3 a.m., and I didn't comment on the equations she scribbled on our bathroom mirror in dry erase marker. College wasn't easy. The scholarship covered the essentials, but essentials didn't include the high-end laptop required for advanced programming courses. It didn't cover the software licenses, the conference fees, or the 1,000 invisible expenses that came with pursuing a top-tier education in computer science. So I adapted. I took night shifts at the 24-hour cafe near campus, pouring coffee for fellow insomniacs and coding between customers. I found freelance work debugging websites and creating basic apps for local businesses. On weekends, I entered hackathons, not just for the prize money, but for the free food that would stock my mini fridge for days. "You're like a machine," Zoe commented one night, finding me still awake at 2 a.m., coding by the blue light of my screen. "Do you ever sleep?" "Sleep is inefficient," I replied, only half joking. The truth was, exhaustion had become my constant companion, but so had purpose. Every line of code I wrote was a step away from dependency on people who had deemed me unworthy of investment. During my second semester, Professor Ellison, my advanced AI design instructor, took notice of my work. After class one day, he asked me to stay behind. "Your algorithm for the pattern recognition assignment," he said, peering at me over his glasses. "It's unusual. Creative. Where did you learn this approach?" "I didn't," I admitted. "I was working with limited processing power on my laptop, so I had to find a workaround." He nodded, understanding the subtext. MIT was full of students with cutting-edge equipment funded by parents or industry sponsors. And then there were students like me. "There's a project I'm working on," he said carefully. "A research initiative exploring AI applications in education. I could use someone with your resourcefulness." That project became my salvation. The stipend wasn't much, but it meant I could cut back on cafe shifts. More importantly, it gave me access to the department's computers, powerful machines that could run simulations my laptop would choke on. Late nights in the empty lab became my new normal. While other students returned to their dorms, I remained, piecing together what would eventually become the prototype for an AI-based education tool. I built it using discarded parts from the engineering department's recycling bin and software I coded from scratch. I didn't have funding. I had fire. By junior year, the prototype was functional, a learning algorithm that adapted to different cognitive styles, making education more accessible to students who struggled with traditional methods. Professor Ellison was impressed enough to help me enter it in the university's innovation competition. I didn't win first place. That went to a team developing a new renewable energy solution. But I caught the attention of a venture capitalist who specialized in education technology. "Your approach is unorthodox," she told me after the presentation, "but effective. Have you considered the commercial applications?" I had. In fact, I'd spent countless nights mapping out exactly how my system could be scaled and deployed, particularly in underfunded schools where personalized education was a luxury, not a standard. Throughout all of this, communication with my family dwindled to occasional text messages. My mother's "How are you?" received single-word responses. My father's inquiries about my college experience went unanswered for days. Jake's sporadic updates about his startup were left on read. They knew I was at MIT. They knew I had a scholarship, but they had no idea who I was becoming in the silence of my determination. They had no concept of the foundation I was building while they continued to pour resources into Jake's increasingly unstable venture. I kept my head down and my goals clear. By graduation day, when I stood alone among peers surrounded by proud families, I had more than a degree in my hands. I had a prototype, a business plan, and a vision that would soon take me further than anyone in my family had imagined possible. And I had done it all without them. After graduation, I vanished from their radar. It wasn't difficult. They hadn't been tracking me closely anyway. The occasional holiday text message or obligatory birthday call was easy enough to minimize until it faded entirely. My new Boston apartment had a view of the Charles River and a spare bedroom I converted into a home office. No forwarding address was sent to the house I grew up in. While Jake's startup floundered under his ego and failed pitches, I was quietly pitching to Silicon Valley investors. My first meeting was with Horizon Ventures, a small firm known for taking chances on unconventional founders. I wore a simple black blazer, carried my prototype in a worn backpack, and spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to lose and everything to prove. Most educational AI focuses on replacing teachers, I explained, pulling up my demonstration. Mine focuses on empowering them. It identifies learning patterns invisible to the human eye and adapts in real time to each student's needs. The lead investor, Diane Maxwell, leaned forward as the algorithm processed a sample dataset, showing how it could detect when a student was struggling with a concept even before test results revealed it. "You built this prototype by yourself?" she asked, clearly skeptical. "With limited resources," I confirmed. "Imagine what it could do with proper funding." 3 days later, I had my seed money. Not a fortune, but enough to rent a small office space and hire 2 programmers who believed in the vision. We worked 18-hour days, subsisting on coffee and takeout, refining the algorithm until it could process information faster than any educational software on the market. I named the company BrightPath, not for the light it would bring to others, but for the path I'd illuminated for myself when no one else would. By 24, I had my own team. 15 people who respected my vision and never questioned why the founder of a promising tech startup maintained such a low profile. No social media presence. No industry mixers. I sent representatives to conferences where our software was demonstrated while I directed operations from behind the scenes. My name appeared on necessary documents, but I always declined interviews. When tech blogs wrote about the mysterious founder of BrightPath, I let the speculation run wild. Some assumed I was older, a veteran educator turned tech visionary. Others thought I might be running the company as a side project while working for a major corporation. No one connected me to the family name I'd slowly been detaching from. By 26, my AI tool was being used in underfunded schools across the world. We'd started in inner-city Boston, then expanded to rural areas in the Midwest where teacher shortages made personalized education seem impossible. The results were irrefutable. Students using BrightPath showed improvement rates 40% higher than control groups. The emails from teachers kept me going on the hardest days. For the first time, Elijah finished an entire math assignment without giving up. Your software knew exactly when to offer extra help and when to push him forward. My classroom has 28 students with different needs. BrightPath feels like having a second teacher who never gets tired. We expanded internationally, focusing on regions with limited educational resources. A pilot program in rural India, a partnership with schools in South Africa. Each success added to our credibility and our reach. Tech expos in Germany, Japan, and Dubai began inviting me to speak. I always declined personally, but sent my chief technology officer instead, a brilliant woman named Sophia who could articulate our vision to any audience. The company grew, but I remained in the shadows, directing our expansion with precision and purpose. Then came the article in Tech Innovator, Education's Invisible Revolutionary, the enigma behind BrightPath's success. The writer had done her research, tracking the company's meteoric rise and puzzling over my absence from the spotlight. In an industry where founders typically seek celebrity status, she wrote, Emily Carter's deliberate anonymity is perhaps her most disruptive innovation. I kept that article, not out of vanity, but as a reminder of how far I'd come from the girl whose family had deemed her unworthy of investment. My parents didn't read Tech Innovator. Jake might have, but he was busy dealing with the collapse of his own venture. According to industry gossip, which I followed with detached interest, his animal filter app had failed to secure second-round funding. Investors had grown weary of delayed launches and pivots that led nowhere. I watched from afar as his dream crumbled, feeling neither satisfaction nor sympathy. His failure wasn't my victory. My success wasn't his defeat. We were simply on different trajectories, guided by different stars. But our paths would cross again sooner than I expected, and the collision would force me to confront the past I'd worked so hard to outrun. He came crashing down faster than anyone expected. I learned about Jake's complete downfall not through family channels, but from TechCrunch. The headline was brutal in its simplicity. Animal Me Shudders, another cautionary tale of style over substance. The article detailed how Jake's company had burned through its funding with lavish office perks and marketing campaigns while delivering an app that was essentially a clone of 3 existing products. But the final nail in the coffin came from an anonymous whistleblower, a former developer who revealed that the code Jake had been claiming as his revolutionary creation was actually outsourced to a development shop in Eastern Europe. The investors hadn't just pulled out, they were considering legal action. I read the article twice, sitting in my corner office overlooking the Boston skyline. The empire I'd built in silence provided a perfect vantage point to witness his very public fall. "Something interesting?" asked Sophia, my CTO, nodding toward my screen as she dropped off quarterly projection reports. "Just industry news," I replied, closing the browser. "How are the school implementations in Detroit going?" That evening, I made a rare personal call to a contact in venture capital. "What's the word on Animal Me?" "Off the record." "Total disaster," she replied. "Jake Carter's reputation is radioactive now. No one will touch him with a 10-foot pole. Word is, his parents mortgaged their house to cover some of the debts." My parents sold one of their properties to cover his debts. The beach house in Maine, most likely. The place where we'd spent summers when Jake and I were young, before the golden child narrative had fully crystallized, when we were just siblings building sandcastles together. I felt a twinge of something. Not quite sympathy, but recognition of a shared history now further fractured. They had invested everything in him, twice over. First my college fund, now their own security. A week later, the message appeared in my LinkedIn inbox. "Emily, it's been too long. I've been following your success with BrightPath from afar. Impressive work. I have some ideas for a new educational app that could complement what you're doing. Maybe we could collaborate? The Carter siblings could restore the family name in tech. Let me know if you'd be open to grabbing coffee next time you're in the Bay Area."
Jake.
The audacity was so breathtaking it almost commanded respect. He'd failed spectacularly, been exposed as a fraud, cost our parents their property, and his first instinct was to try to hitch his wagon to my success. They still didn't know I was the mind behind BrightPath, the software making global headlines. Or at least, Jake didn't seem to make the connection between his little sister and the elusive founder described in tech media. Perhaps the idea that I could achieve something of this magnitude without his guidance or my parents' support was simply inconceivable to him. I left the message unanswered and turned my attention to our upcoming product launch. BrightPath 2.0 would include features specifically designed for students with learning disabilities, an area close to my heart since my roommate Zoe had struggled with undiagnosed ADHD throughout college. But Jake wasn't one to accept silence as a response. 3 days later, my personal email, an address only a handful of people had, received a message with the subject line: "Families should stick together. Emily, I know we've had our differences, but I really think we could create something amazing together. You've clearly mastered the education space, and I have connections in social that could help expand your reach. Mom and Dad are going through a rough time with a property sale. Wouldn't it be great to show them what their kids can do as a team? Let me know."
Jake.
The desperation was thinly veiled between forced positivity and appeals to family loyalty. It wasn't just about rebuilding his career. He was trying to salvage his identity as the family's golden child, the one who would justify their investment. I drafted and deleted 5 different responses before settling on continued silence. Any engagement would only open a door I had firmly closed years ago. That night, I received a text from a number I still knew by heart, despite not having dialed it in years. "Emily, it's Mom. Jake mentioned he's reached out to you about a business opportunity. We're so proud of both our children and would love nothing more than to see you work together. Your father and I have had some financial setbacks recently, but family is what matters most. Please call when you can." They were circling the wagons, uniting to draw me back into their orbit now that Jake's star had fallen and mine was rising. Now that they needed something from me. The timing couldn't have been more ironic. I had just accepted an invitation I'd previously declined multiple times to be the keynote speaker at the Global Tech Horizon Summit in San Francisco. After years in the shadows, I was finally ready to step into the light. And unwittingly, I had set the stage for a family reunion none of us would forget. They walked into the expo like they owned the place. The Global Tech Horizon Summit transformed San Francisco's Moscone Center into a cathedral of innovation. Startup founders, venture capitalists, and tech media mingled beneath floating holograms displaying the conference schedule. My name, Emily Carter, founder of BrightPath, appeared in glowing letters on the main stage backdrop. After years of deliberate anonymity, I had decided to reveal the face behind the algorithm. Not for publicity, but for purpose. Schools in underserved communities were struggling to secure funding to implement educational technology. A high-profile appearance would bring attention to our foundation's work providing free BrightPath licenses to schools that couldn't afford them. I stood backstage, reviewing my presentation notes one final time. The blue glow of my tablet illuminated the simple black dress I'd chosen, understated but authoritative. No flashy Silicon Valley aesthetic. No performance. Just the work and the impact. 5 minutes, Miss Carter. A staff member informed me, handing me a bottle of water. That's when I saw them through the side curtain, my parents, navigating the crowd with confident smiles. My mother wore a designer dress I didn't recognize. My father had a new watch catching the light as he shook hands with a journalist. They were working the room, introducing themselves to anyone who would listen. And there was Jake, trailing behind them, wearing a conference badge that said co-founder in bold letters. Co-founder of a company he had nothing to do with, of an algorithm written during sleepless nights when they had all forgotten I existed. The audacity stole my breath. A hot wave of anger crashed over me, followed by something colder and more calculated. After everything, after the college fund, after the years of being the afterthought, after building myself from nothing, they were here to claim ownership of my success. I stepped away from the curtain and found the head of security, a former military woman named Diana, who took her job very seriously. "There's a man with a badge that says co-founder," I said quietly. "His name is Jake Carter. He has no affiliation with BrightPath, and I need him removed from the premises immediately." Diana's expression didn't change. "Consider it done. And the older couple he's with, they can stay for now, but they need to be monitored." She nodded once, then spoke into her radio. I watched from a distance as two security personnel approached Jake discreetly. There was a brief, heated exchange. My brother's face flushed red as they escorted him toward the exit. My parents looked confused, then alarmed, but made no move to follow him. "Miss Carter." The event coordinator appeared at my side. "You're on in 2 minutes." I took a deep breath and centered myself. This moment wasn't about them. It was about the culmination of years of work, dedication, and purpose. The lights dimmed. The MC's voice boomed through the venue. "Ladies and gentlemen, our keynote speaker today is the founder and CEO of BrightPath, the revolutionary AI-based education platform currently empowering students in 47 countries. After years of working behind the scenes, she's here to share her vision for the future of personalized learning. Please welcome Emily Carter." Applause erupted as I walked onto the stage, the spotlight following me to the podium. I looked out at the sea of faces and found them immediately, my parents, in the third row, their expressions a mixture of shock and dawning recognition. I smiled and adjusted the microphone. "When your own family tells you that you're not worth investing in," I began, my voice steady and clear, "sometimes that's exactly the fuel you need." A murmur rippled through the audience. This wasn't the standard tech keynote opening about disruption and innovation. But I hadn't come this far by following standard paths. 8 years ago, my college fund was given away because I wasn't considered the genius in the family. Today, BrightPath is helping thousands of students discover their own genius, regardless of who believes in them. I launched into my presentation, explaining how our AI adapted to different learning styles, how it identified potential in students that traditional methods overlooked. With each slide, each demonstration, I built a vision of education that left no one behind, that saw value in every mind. My parents remained frozen in their seats, the color draining from their faces as they realized that the little girl they had dismissed had built an empire while they weren't looking. I didn't acknowledge them directly. I didn't need to. The contrast between what they had expected of me and what I had accomplished spoke volumes. After the presentation, amidst thunderous applause, I was swarmed by investors, educators, and media. Through the crowd, I caught glimpses of my parents trying to approach the stage, their attempts blocked by the flow of well-wishers and the subtle positioning of security staff I had instructed to keep them at a distance. They would have to wait. Just as I had waited for years for acknowledgement, for support, for basic belief in my potential. The difference was I no longer needed any of it from them. Now they know, and they want in. The aftermath of the summit was a whirlwind. BrightPath's stock rose 15% overnight. Investment offers flooded my inbox. 3 university computer science departments invited me to give guest lectures. The mystery founder was a mystery no more, and the world seemed fascinated by both the technology and the woman behind it. But amid the professional chaos were the messages I had been expecting and dreading. First came the texts, sent in rapid succession like digital pebbles thrown at my window. "Emily, we had no idea. We're so proud of what you've accomplished.
Mom.
Your presentation was brilliant. We need to talk. Dad, why didn't you tell us you were behind BrightPath? We're your family."
Mom.
When I didn't respond, the voicemail started. "Emily, it's Dad. What happened at the conference was unfortunate, but we should clear the air. Call me back." "Honey, it's Mom. We've been trying to reach you. Please call us. We love you, and we're so incredibly proud of you." Their voices held a note I'd never heard before, desperation tinged with awe. The golden child's star had fallen, and the afterthought had eclipsed him. The natural order of their world had been upended. Jake's message came through LinkedIn again, his tone markedly different from his previous outreach. "Emily, I respect what you did at the summit. I deserved it. I should have known the brilliant kid who built a computer from scraps would outshine everyone.
Can we talk?
No business, just family. I miss my sister." 3 days after the summit, a thick cream-colored envelope arrived in my office. Inside was a handwritten letter on my mother's stationery, the familiar looping script now shaky with emotion. "My dearest Emily, words cannot express our regret for how we've failed you. Seeing you on that stage, so accomplished, so brilliant, made me realize what we threw away. Not just financially, but emotionally. We didn't see you. We didn't believe in you the way parents should believe in their child. Your father and I have made terrible mistakes. What we did with your college fund was unconscionable. We let Jake's charisma blind us to your quiet determination. We invested in flash instead of substance. We're so proud of you now, Emily. So incredibly proud of the woman and visionary you've become. We want nothing more than to rebuild our relationship with you, to be a part of your life again, in whatever capacity you'll allow. With deepest love and admiration, Mom." The letter trembled in my hands. For a moment, just a moment, I felt the pull of what could have been. Sunday dinners discussing code architecture with my father. Holiday gatherings where my mother bragged about my latest innovation. A family that celebrated my achievements rather than overlooked them. But it was a mirage, shimmering and insubstantial, built on the foundation of their current needs rather than genuine change. The final blow came in an email from my father a week later. The subject line read simply, "Financial situation. Emily, I hope this finds you well. Your mother and I have been reflecting deeply on our past mistakes and how we failed to support you when you needed us. I'm writing because we find ourselves in a difficult position. The investments we made in Jake's company have left us with significant debt. Additionally, he has accrued new debts attempting to launch another venture for which we unfortunately co-signed the loans. We're not asking for a handout, but perhaps you might consider bringing Jake on at BrightPath in some capacity. His experience, despite recent setbacks, could be valuable. Alternatively, a loan to help us stabilize would be deeply appreciated. We're so proud of what you've built, and we'd be honored to be a part of your journey moving forward. Love, Dad." The truth finally laid bare. Not "we're proud of you now," but "we need you now." Not "we want to rebuild our relationship," but "we want to rebuild our finances." I drafted my response with careful precision. "You made your investment. I became mine. Good luck getting returns from him." Then I blocked their email addresses, phone numbers, and social media accounts. I instructed my assistant to screen all correspondence and return any physical mail from them. They begged, just as I knew they would. My father went so far as to show up at our Boston office, where security politely but firmly turned him away. My mother left tearful voicemails on my old number until she realized I'd changed it. Jake tried to approach me at an industry event in New York, only to find himself escorted out once again. Because when you make someone beg, make sure they remember they had a choice once, and they chose someone else. I didn't need their validation anymore. I didn't need their approval or their remorse. What I had built was mine alone, earned through nights when they didn't call to check if I was eating, through challenges they never knew I faced, through triumphs they never thought to celebrate. Some say success is the best revenge, but it's not about revenge for me. It's about justice, the natural consequence of their choices and mine. They chose Jake. I chose myself, and I would make that same choice every time.